We are going to talk all about meat today. Meat, M-E-A-T. And there's a reason for that. There's kind of a big football game coming up this weekend. And it is, as it turns out, I've done some research, it's the biggest food holiday in America right after Thanksgiving. And the big winner are chicken wings. We eat during this game more than 100 million pounds of chicken wings. Isn't that astounding? Burgers come in second. There's like 14 million burgers will get grilled or cooked and eaten this Sunday. Sausage pizzas take up, tons of space on the table as we're watching television. Meaty snacks, hot dogs, and sausage at the game itself in Las Vegas will be astounding. Something like 40,000 of these snacks go out. So it seems to me this is the perfect time to talk about one of my favorite things, and that is meat. Also, do you believe that there are people who count that sort of thing? We have a delicious program for you today. It's all about meat, and I have a completely unbiased set of panelists here ready to talk about this. I'll lead off with Steve Barnes, who's a longtime food critic and the table hopping columnist for the Albany Times-Union. And Tiim Howland is the director of operations and a big player in Primal, one of the great butcher shops in the Albany area. And we have Emily Petersen, who is a teacher and a whole carcass butcher herself. These are fascinating people, and we're going to talk about the world of meat. So let me start off with this opening, and I want you all to respond to this. Does the ferocity and the self-righteousness of vegetarians bother you? Does it strike you as very odd? Start with Steve.
Well, like any benighted minority, they feel like they need to get their mission out there. Now, let's put it in context. If you read vegetarian publications, they tell you 10% of Americans are vegan or vegetarian. A recent Gallup poll from just last year put it at 4% vegetarian, 1% vegan. So Gallup says half as many as the vegetarians and vegans do. Mm-hmm. Now, for context, there are more Buddhists in this country than there are vegans. So I believe they have a right to exist. But that doesn't mean that I want every time I mention a steakhouse opening, and a colleague who shall go unnamed posts on Facebook that I'm promoting death merchants.
Oh my gosh. Emily, you have been a victim of vegan and vegetarian anger. Tell us about that.
Well, Steve had done an article on the opening of my butcher shop in Troy. And we had some photographs of product that I had hanging in my cooler. And one of the carcasses was a lamb. It was skinned, and it was head on, because I prefer to keep the cheek meat. It's very valuable. So Steve, did a fantastic article and posted it. And he did warn me. To be fair, he warned me, and he said, "Emily, whatever you do, don't read the comments." And so of course I'm like, okay, read the comments. Heard. All right. And the next day, I was so happy about this article. I was like, oh, this is crazy. This is so great that he's doing this for us. And then I read the comments, and I was in literally, I say I was in a puddle on my kitchen floor in tears. I just so truly believe in what we were doing at the time, and how good it is, for the community to have access to products like that. And the things that people said, I'll never forget it. I was called a sociopath, a psychotic bitch,
oh my
psychopath,
gosh. Yeah, for being a butcher,
murderer. And then I had some vegan animal activists had galvanized this group of UK vegans and animal activists that then these are people from another country that then flooded my social media with 1-star reviews and more scathing comments, to which I had to, go to the social media platforms themselves and, say like, hey, this isn't even possible. These are all fake. And, thankfully most of them got cleared up. But yeah, that was really harsh.
That was very harsh. Tiim, I wish we had video because you're wearing a shirt proudly declaring your own meatitarian tendencies. How do you get any of these attacks like Emily is describing, and how do you respond?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you're going to get that in any walk of life, especially with social media the way that it is. People are more inclined to share their negative feelings about anything that's different about how they feel or view something. We don't get it as much, I don't think. In fact, we do have vegetarians that come in and shop for their families that maybe not, adhere to that way of life. And they seem to be fine. But like I say, I think with the way that society is now with social media and the way that you can speak and say things, without having to look somebody in the eye and say it is very empowering to people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not going to change. And I don't push, my way of thinking upon anybody else. And I don't think anybody else should do that to,
Right.
to how we feel.
I don't care if people eat vegetables. It's fine. I still want my bacon.
Sure. I mow my lawn twice a week, and I don't feel too badly about it.
You look down on those long grass people.
Yeah.
But
right.
how did we come to this? Steve, I'm going to go to you again. In 1928, Herbert Hoover made a campaign pledge out of a chicken in every pot every Sunday. How did we go from that meat as something to attain, a sign of fulfillment and enrichment, to today, where you were made to feel guilty to eat meat? You're hurting the planet. You're mean to animals. How do we get there?
Okay, again, this is only 4% of the population. Sure, they're loud, but the average American consumes something like 70 pounds of beef, 60 pounds of pork, 80 pounds of chicken a year. Sadly, it's only about 2 pounds of lamb, and I know Emily and I collectively eat 2 pounds a week or something. But
True.
So really everybody's eating meat, and there are absolutely legitimate arguments. Factory beef farming and hog farms and chickens. Emily, I know, strongly agrees with this. There's disgusting conditions. So there's absolutely full reason to advocate for moral carnivorism. If you're going to eat meat, you need to acknowledge that the thing had a head on it and was alive. And you should take care of those animals. The problem is it's really expensive to do it that way. You can get a full chicken in the supermarket for like $5. You try to buy a chicken at the farmer's market, it's going to be $20 to $25. So because the cost of meat has been artificially kept down, people have never really thought about what it costs to eat meat, and it really should be a luxury. I mean, you mentioned a big steak, and everybody loves a big steak, but the government's recommended daily portion of meat, a serving of meat, is 4 ounces, size of a playing card.
Yeah.
And so again, the problem is, it's like vegans and vegetarians for me are like the devoutly religious. They feel like they're on a mission. I'm not on a mission. Tim's not on a mission. Emily's not on a mission to convert people to meat. I once, I mean,
Emily's like,
Emily is.
Tim obviously would like to, because he would like more customers, but it's not a moral cause. Whereas the colleague that I mentioned does see it as a moral cause to tell everybody that you're going to kill yourself if you eat a steak. It's when somebody's on a zealous mission like that, of course, they're going to behave in a way that's going to try to get converts. We don't on the meat side, we don't need converts. We're winning.
Yeah. Emily, jump in here. Can you be a good person and a carnivore at the same time?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It at the very least, it doesn't make you any less moral than the vegan faith, where, you know, you're told that they don't eat animal products. But we know, if you know anything about agriculture, in order to monocrop soy and pea, which is our number one meat protein replacement fad foods, that you're killing all kinds of things to bring that food to the table. You know, you're killing anything in those fields: molds, voles, deer, raccoons, any kind of bug that could destroy those crops. And of course, too, you know, we're destroying the soil underneath it by doping it up on herbicides and pesticides to kill the microbiomes that exist within it. And then on top of that, we're dumping those herbicides and pesticides into our water tables. I don't see the moral equivalency there at all. And especially if you're tracing back the food chain, looking at how, you know, agricultural products like produce, you know, they have to go somewhere to get washed and packaged and distributed. If we're looking at pea protein isolate, peas go from a farm, they travel, there's carbon footprint that goes to a processing facility where it could either get washed and distributed, or it's going to get, you know, turned into an isolate through the processes of you know, water and radiation. We're using resources to isolate these proteins, and these proteins are inferior to the nutritional value that we see in meat. So, you know, from a health perspective, from a nutritional perspective, and the climate debate about it, it just when I follow the data to where it's gonna go, there's absolutely no moral posturing a vegan can do that's gonna convince me.
Timmy, let me bring you in here right now. I want to know if you've tasted any of these plant substitutes for meat, and do you worry that they're going to replace your product? You're going to go out of business. Primal won't be able to compete with, you know, fake hamburgers.
No,
what do you think?
I mean, to me, I felt like when it first started to sort of show up, it was more of just kind of a flash in the pan, and then it sort of fizzled out. They don't taste bad necessarily, but it's not going to replace a hamburger in anybody that likes a hamburger's eyes. I mean, it has some flavor profile that's similar. It has a red color based on a beet attribute that they sling into it, but you know, it's never going to really be a replacement, I don't feel. I'll say that we're not worried about it, and I don't think that anybody else in the industry, as far as retail, is worried about it.
If I could make a point, Rosemary, on that subject, one of the things that bothers me about the idea of a meat substitute, a plant-based meat substitute or a replacement, well, why vegetables are wonderful. Can we all agree on that? Vegetables are wonderful.
Yes, yes.
And vegetables go great with meat. You know, you think about that perfect burger. What does it have on it? Lettuce, tomato, onion, pickle. All of those, well, tomatoes are technically not a vegetable, but all of that, they make it better. So they go together well. But I don't understand why we need to have a substitute. Let's celebrate vegetables. You know, the best vegetarian chefs out there, they're not pulling the meat out. They're celebrating vegetables, because the incredible variety of vegetables, you know, to go from the smallest pea to the largest, you know, you think of these squash. I mean, squash can be hundreds of pounds. And things like mushrooms. There's a local company that makes mushroom bacon. Emily, have you had the mushroom bacon from the company in Waterville?
Don't tell my friends, but yes, I have, and it's
It's
really good.
It's a quality product, but as back to Tim's point, it's not
meat. Yeah.
Well, and you know, and you have really good bacon. There's a shameless plug here. There's a Tennessee company called Benton's Bacon. Familiar, Emily, with Benton's? Okay, Benton's Bacon. I had some delivered before they were carried. It was carried locally. I had some delivered, and the UPS guy said even though it was vacuum packed, he could smell it in his truck. So the smoky of Benton's Bacon. So this, I will eat that mushroom bacon. I think it's a good product. I know the guy the chef that helped them develop it. I'm glad. These are the same people that use mycelium for packaging. So I love what they're doing. It's not going to replace bacon for me. So let's not trick people by saying it looks like a burger, it bleeds like a burger, it sort of looks, it tastes like a burger. No, give me a great vegetable and give me some great meat.
This hymn to vegetables and mushrooms especially came to you from Steve Barnes, who's the table hopping food critic and columnist for the Times-Union. We have two other panelists greatly involved with meat, just not just eating it, but they're experts on it. Tiim Howland from Primal Butchery and Emily Petersen, who teaches at Adirondack Community College. We'll be back in a minute and talk more about why we love meat. Armao on the Brink is brought to you by the Donna Frank team of Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, Blake Realtors. That's a mouthful. But Donna is super impressive. We met when she worked at WAMC as a crack fundraiser. And since then, she's moved on to become also crack, a licensed real estate salesperson. Last year, she ranked as the top agent in the Capital Region. If you need honest answers about your real estate, check in with her. You are going to be impressed too, I promise. You can reach her at, this is the email, DonnaFed, DONAFED @gmail.com. I want to thank you, as always, for listening to On the Brink. Let me tell you about some of our sponsors. I'm so proud of their support. The Apple Barn and Country Bake Shop on Route 7 in Vermont is closed right now. It is winter, you remember. They're closed until March 15th, but plans are already underway for a big spring reopening, new festivities. I understand mimosas may be involved, along with the donuts and pies that they're famous for. The Apple Barn. So keep an eye on their website. It is theapplebarn, all one word.com. You'll hear and see announcements there. Karen's Place, Karin, is a gorgeous retreat. I've been there and visited on 22 acres out in Vermont, rural Vermont. It's available for rental for everything from weddings and family reunions to corporate conferences. It's close to city centers around here, but you would think you were in another country. It's beautiful. Go to www.karensplacevt.com. Thank you. We're back with On the Brink. I love meat, and our panelists today are Steve Barnes, Albany Times-Union. He knows about food, is a critic and a restaurant guide. Tiim Howland, who is director of operations at Primal, and Emily Petersen, who is a butcher herself, and also teaches butchery. Emily, how'd you get interested in this field? It's an unusual one for women.
Oh gosh, I get that a lot. Well, Tim was weren't you like you were district manager at the time of the meat house, I thought.
I was a GM with the meat house.
Yeah, right. So he had another manager under him that worked at the Saratoga store who the staff there was just great, and I was shopping in there quite a bit, and he just had a great staff, and they were really cool guys, a lot of fun to chat with. And at the time I was working at my children's private school as the chef and teaching a culinary class there. So I had also been in food service and hospitality up to that point for about a decade. And I don't know, I was cashing out one day, and I think they needed help over at the meat house, and one of his managers just straight up asked me at the cash register, he's like, "Hey, do you know anybody with a personality like yours that wants to learn how to cut meat?" And I'm like, "This chick right here, sign me up." It's just
That's
so
cool.
interesting. And I know just from being in kitchens that the craft of butchery really has a lot of dignity there, and I was really drawn to it because I really, if to be perfectly honest, felt like this is going to be a leg up in my career. This adds more value to my resume to learn this. And then we just took it from there. And
it's an extremely old and filled with tradition as a craft, isn't it? Yeah. Tiim, do you have trouble recruiting people? Many businesses after COVID are. Yeah, I know. Do you have something beyond that because of cutting meat? It's kind of messy. It's knives. It's dangerous. Or no? Do you get?
I don't really think it's for that. I think it's just everybody's in that boat right now. It's wholesale as far as that goes. I mean, it doesn't matter what business you're in. Employment and employees are just really hard to find. Right. It seems like it's starting to come around just a little bit now. But I don't think it's necessarily the business itself. I think
I got a bunch of kids in a journalism class. I know there are no jobs there. I'm going to just steer them your way, I think.
Yes, send them over.
Steve, let's talk a little bit about health now. Meat has been implicated, if not exactly cited as the main cause for obesity and hypertension and diabetes. What's the answer that meat lovers ought to give to that argument? Don't eat meat, it'll kill you.
How about don't eat crap?
There you go. Don't go to McDonald's.
I mean, seriously, I saw something that there's now a debate that maybe potatoes should be reclassified as not a vegetable because more than 50% of potatoes that come out of the ground are turned into some sort of potato product, like a French fry, so they're processed. Stop eating crap. You can go ahead. Absolutely, you could eat a quality piece of steak every single day and be much healthier if you dropped the potato chips, if you put down the Fritos, if you didn't have the ice cream. If you think of it, people who exist on largely meat diets, you think of some of the Alaskan Native peoples that eat seals and blubber kind of thing, and high fat diets, high protein diets, but they're also active and they don't eat junk food. I read somewhere just recently, I pulled a statistic. It didn't define exactly what a snack was, but said the average American has a snack 3 times a day. And so if those snacks are coming out of a vending machine, if you're getting a little package of Cheetos, turn over, I once posed a question. I said, once a year, I get a craving for Taco Bell. And it's just once a year. And then I have a Taco Bell bean burrito and I feel like garbage. And I said, what do I do about this? And the chef, Rick Orlando, said, look at the list of ingredients. That will disincline you from eating it. And so, yes, too much meat, sure. If you're having lots of meat, lots of high saturated fats. But I really don't think a quality diet of quality proteins, eaten in moderation, and with your vegetables it's got to be better than highly processed food, fast food, junk food.
Yeah, my dad died of all those things, hypertension and obesity at least, and his diet was hugely red meat because he could get it from the store. It was the cheapest for him. But he also smoked and never exercised. He never got off the couch. We know so much more now about eating. So did red meat really kill him, or was it the lifestyle? Emily, can you explain a little bit more? Maybe this is a dumb question, what processed meat is. I've been reading about that. It's some of the junk food that Steve is talking about, but what's processed meat?
Processed meat, I would say I'd classify that into a value added category, which is just about anything that isn't a whole cut of meat, that is just a finished, individually portioned cut of meat, or a subprimal or a primal cut. Anything else you do to it, you process it. So that could mean compressing it, adding in additives and preservatives to do like deli meats. Sausages are considered a processed meat. Dried cured meats.
Salami. Hot dogs. Salami and hot dogs, right?
Yeah. It's anything that's processed. And to that point, though, every single meat replacement product is processed. So, I just want to point that out because, we can put processed meat up against, Beyond Burger any day, and or textured soy protein, or vegan chicken nuggets. or it's all processed, you know,
Yeah.
and it all has, you know, similar additives and preservatives added to it, you know. So
Tim, this is
Not
something
great.
this is something I wanted to ask you, Tim. I keep saying that the beef now is not the beef my father sold 20 and 30 years ago. And there's much talk about growth hormones and other kinds of additives added to the meat. There's stories about girls having menstruation earlier than ever because it's brought on by stuff in meat. How much of that is true? How much of it is a danger? How do you avoid it?
Well, there's certainly truth to it. It depends on where you shop. It depends on, you know, what type of meat that the places you shop carry. If you go to a place like, you know, where we are at Primal, it's a hormone-free, antibiotic-free, steroid-free product. So you sort of have to know a little bit about what, you know, what goes into some raising of cattle, and where you can go to get the finest product for you, the healthiest thing for you to have.
If I buy a burger from you, Tim, can you tell me where it came from?
I can't tell
Yeah,
you
that's
the
a good
farm,
question.
but we're a little bit too big of an operation to be able to do that. Based on, so for instance, you have a cow, it's got a right side and a left side, as Emily can vouch for that.
Yes,
Even I can
Do
vouch
we
for
need
that.
that
Yeah.
vouched on? Yeah.
There are primal cuts on each side, and you can only get so many steaks off of each primal cut. So most the three biggest selling steaks, if you go to any shop, is a sirloin, a ribeye, and a fillet. And there's only so much that you get from every animal. So if you take, for instance, a small farm or a small operation, they have a lot of byproduct past those three cuts. So for my store, you know, in the summertime, in 1 week in one location, I'm going through probably, you know, almost 200 pounds of sirloin in a week. You know, each loin, so left side and right side, remember, each loin of like a sirloin is going to be between 12 and 14 pounds. So you extrapolate that out, you're looking at, you know, 4 or 5 animals worth of one cut. There's a lot of byproduct for there. So unless you're a kind of a smaller operation, and Emily again ran a nose to tail butchery, she'll tell you, you know, it can be tough when there's certain cuts of an animal that are more popular and certain cuts that aren't. It's
Sure,
harder to do that.
You know, but like 677 Prime at one point was selling 14,000 filet mignon a year.
Sure, exactly.
Which,
point.
And there's only two tenderloins per cow. But I guess my question was, though, if I said, is this the meat in this burger came from, you know, a smaller farm and that was, you know, raised on pasture, and you assure me of that what's in that burger blend that I'm buying from you is pure beef. You know,
oh, absolutely. Yep. No
okay.
Additives. It is for us. We grind, for instance, is a pure loin. So there's no additives in there. There's no, you're getting pure beef.
Yeah, yes. Where's the beef there? And in contrast, going back to Emily's point, I just looked this up. A Beyond Burger includes water. That's the first ingredient. Water, pea protein, expeller pressed canola oil, refined coconut, rice protein, natural flavors, dried yeast, cocoa butter, methyl cellulose, 1% potato starch, salt, potassium chloride, beet juice, apple extract, pomegranate, sunflower lecithin, vinegar, lemon juice concentrate, 6 or 7 vitamins, and calcium panthonate.
Right. You are demonstrating Michael Pollan's rules.
Steve, I can tell you that our ground chuck is 85% beef protein and 15% beef fat. And
these two gentlemen have just demonstrated that Michael Pollan, the food writer's rules on food. Don't eat food that has more than 5 ingredients, or any ingredients that you can't pronounce, or any ingredients that you don't recognize as food, and that certainly fit in this. I want to ask if any of you are familiar with or have ever seen on TikTok this big star, the Liver Man. Is that familiar to any of you?
Yeah.
Okay. What do you think? Is his lifestyle, is that healthy? Do you recommend this? I confess I'm just hearing about him and must check him out. Liver
I
is
think
gross.
he just got debunked for,
Yeah, he
for
did,
using
yeah.
anabolic steroids, actually.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, with
Yeah,
his
he
liver.
did. Yeah.
However, there's, I think it's I think it's really interesting because this is what science does, right? We look at these control groups and we can start extrapolating data from, what these people are doing. And we don't think in our food history that we, aside from, those Inuit cultures that, eat primarily meat and frozen deer and such, that, we can like look at now a group of people like the opposite of vegans following the carnivore diet, which is getting really, really popular in the fitness community.
Right, it is. But the Liver King has been dethroned. That's what you're telling
I
me.
mean, but to be clear, before we had multivitamins, people were eating liver to get their minerals and nutrients and vitamins. So there's a reason why, people were forcing liver and onions on their kids, and it made all these nightmares. But,
Okay, well, then let me bring up Joe.
that.
I'm sorry, let me bring up another podcaster, Joe Rogan, who's got a big deal now with elk meat, a very exotic meat. What do you think of that?
Elk is actually one of the leanest meats that's lowest in cholesterol. Game meats like elk, deer, and rabbit are very lean. So, if you're a person watching your cholesterol and you really, really like meat, those are great options for sure. I could see why he'd be into it for sure.
Elk is delicious. I mean, for me, I could. Sorry, Tim, but I'm about to say that I could give up beef, but I could not give up red meat if that meant members of the venison family, because I absolutely love venison and elk, and I even had moose once back when Sarah Palin was part of the conversation. You can't sell moose because moose are impossible to raise on a ranch, but so a reader volunteered me moose meat, so I made a moose burger. It was really something. You figure it's a burger is a burger is a burger. No, a moose burger tastes different.
Tim, what's the most exotic piece of meat you ever ate?
Oh, I've eaten
everything.
Yeah, I'm down for trying anything.
Caribou.
Yeah, I've had caribou. Yep.
Kangaroo.
Kangaroo I've eaten. Camel.
Kangaroo's good.
Turtle.
Oh, camel.
A couple different snake species I've had.
Oh no, I can't do snakes.
You gotta try it.
I tried it. No, I saw it. I was in Thailand. I was there. Insects and snakes, can't do it. How about cat and dog? That's acceptable in some places.
I guess the country. I've never had that before, but I don't think I'd go that far.
No.
I've got a great dog meat story for you.
This is Steve Barnes of the Times-Union you're listening to. Go
ahead. Back when the Beijing Olympics were happening, the Beijing government banned dog meat from restaurants because it would be a bad look internationally. And a feature that I used to do on my blog was I'd have some food related picture and I'd say, caption this. So I had a picture of what was clearly a dead dog and a guy in chef's whites and a knife, and he was butchering the dog. And and I put it under caption this, which was usually funny. And this caused a firestorm. It was the only time in the history of my blog that the then editor, Rex Smith, wanted to force me to take something off of the blog. And he admitted that it was because he had a dog and was offended that I had a picture of a dead dog being used for meat. And I called him on it and said, I will take this down, but I want a paragraph from you explaining why this is the only time you've ever interfered with my blog. And he backed off. And Anthony Bourdain has said, he had dogs, he loves dogs, they're important to him. But if he's somewhere where dog is a considered cuisine and they've prepared him a special meal that's significant in their culture, who the hell is he to say no and look down on him? So it's this sort of moral relativism. I feel the same way about horse. Oh, Tim, have you had horse?
I have not had horse.
I have had horse.
I've always wanted to have.
It's awful. It's awful. There's no marbling in it. It's.
I can imagine it's very
smooth.
Lean.
Oh yeah.
So well, there's a lot of the wild game. I mean, horses were at some point wild game.
Yeah.
But most wild game, if you, I don't know if any of you have hunting background, but I grew up, hunting and fishing. So I used to self-taught myself, butchery at first through breaking down my own animals. And if once you pull the skin and you remove the fat and you look at a wild animal, depending on the season, it's very, very lean. And the majority of the fat that you will see is fat on the outer. It's not marble. It's not
right, not marbled inside of it.
That-
We need to take a short break. We'll be back in a minute and on the brink. I love our sponsors, and I want to tell you about two more of them. One is Pine Valley Press of Williamstown, Mass. It was founded way back in 1979. Go here. I'll give you their website in a second. You can find here and even order the music of David Keckley. He is the composer who put together those segments that you hear at the beginning, the end, and in the intervals in our podcast. We get numerous comments, usually almost always compliments about that music. That's Pine Valley Press, all one word, .com. Check it out. And one of our first sponsors, still with us, has been Peacock Pots Pottery. That's a tongue twister for me. They offer the unique work of their founder, who is engineer turned artist, Ona Papageorgiou. You can check out the pictures of what she is capable of. It's really remarkable. At, again, all one word, peacockpots.com. We are speaking with three meat lovers. Well, I guess four, because I'm included in this conversation. And unapologetic meat lovers. We have Steve Barnes from the Albany Times-Union, Emily Petersen, who teaches at Adirondack Community College, and Tiim Howland, who works at Primal. It's a butcher store, a really good one. And we are talking about the value of meat in our diets. I want to get back to you, Emily, because you were starting to talk, and then we went off on exotic meats we've eaten or not eaten or thrown up over. Meat in athletic diets. Can you be a top flight athlete and not eat meat? And what about keto? A lot of athletes use that, and that's strongly based on meat protein.
Okay, yeah. There have been some athletes that have relied on really well procured vegan diets to make gains in the gym and perform athletically. However, having said that, okay, we have to consider that not all protein is equal, right? And if we're looking at vegetarian or options to replace the protein value of meat, you're talking about having to double, triple, quadruple the amount of intake that you're doing. You're going to have to layer your amino acids that come from different vegetables in order to come up with complete chains of formidable proteins. What we do know about proteins, right? It's 9 amino acids, and each of those amino acids come in different quantities in different foods. And for example, one of these proteins or the aminos is methionine. Methionine is an antioxidant. It's in high volumes in meat. It's almost non-existent in pea and soy, which are highest the highest levels of vegetable protein, right? So if we don't have enough methionine, then we could look at immune issues. Methionine helps to regulate metabolic processes in our digestion, so just as one example of how our vegetable proteins are insufficient. And so when we're looking at these amounts of proteins in vegetables, and I'm going to pull out peas, right? For example, 1 cup of peas, 145 grams, 8 grams of protein out of 145 grams. So in order to get 50 grams of protein, you're going to need to eat 6.5 cups of Okay.
That's
And
a lot.
if a pint's a pound the world around, we're talking 3.5-ish pounds. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yes, or we can look at the protein, the remnant amount of proteins in corn, soy, beans, the legume family, and we're going to have to take all of these amino acids and build them up basically in stacks in order to equal what you can get, simply put, out of meat. So if you're a really wealthy person, an athletic person with a great trainer and a team of dietitians behind you, and you can afford that kind of construction of a diet, go for it.
Go at it.
So-
Yeah, go at it.
So basically, you have to have a nutritionist and a pro athlete bankroll.
Right, and somebody smacking good protein out of your hand, I'd be really upset about that. You have to have a professional food smacker to follow me around to tell me to eat 6 pounds of peas a day so I can make it in the gym.
How can you run or jump if you've had 6 pounds of peas in you either? That's another issue.
But also think about what comes with that. The carbohydrates that come with vegetables.
Sure.
So you look at the protein the makeup of meat in general is 75 to 80% water, 20 to 25% protein, and anywhere from 5 to 10% fat. So and you look at the amount of protein, what makes up peas, it's mostly carbohydrates and about 8% protein, and those proteins are insufficient in amino buildups. So all told, can it be done? Sure, but it's going to be a heck of a lot of extra hassle, to get the same results with less product, just eating meat.
That's
Sure.
interesting. Steve, during the break, you did a little research and you were going to bring us up to date on the Liver King, the TikTok star.
I didn't think I knew who he was, but then I saw a picture of him. And you look at this.
We'll post some of this. We'll post something.
Grotesquely overpumped guy who's, he preaches ancestral tenets: sleep, eat, move, shield, connect, cold, sun, fight, bond. And so there's this dude and he's trying on liver, and he was like, hey, if you eat all this raw stuff, you can look like me. Well, a leak of private emails revealed that he'd spent over $11,000 a month on anabolic steroids and other performance enhancing drugs.
No wonder vegetarians hate us. Guys like him ruining our reputation. Tim, I have to ask you about tomahawk steaks, $1,000, steaks encrusted with gold. Is that worth it?
No, it's not. Here's once upon a time, I was speaking with a wine aficionado, and I was just kind of getting into the world of wine. So I asked him, should I try $1,000 bottle of wine? And he goes, what you have to think about is this: if you pay for something, whether it's meat, whether it's a drink, whatever it happens to be, you're paying $1,000 for it, you should get $1,000 worth back from it. So if you aren't getting that, then it's not worth it. So, if you're spending $1,000 on a steak, if you're not getting that back in an enjoyment factor, then it's not worth it. So for me, for $1,000 for a steak, absolutely not. That's crazy.
Okay, but let's play devil's advocate here and say
this is Steve Barnes. Let me introduce. We have 2 men speaking. I want to make sure listeners know who is who. This is Steve Barnes, food critic, being critical.
No. But I'm looking for, because I asked this question regularly. Wine is perfect, because is a $10 bottle of wine 1/10 as good as a $100 bottle of wine? No. But it gets more interesting and more complex, and there are a $100 bottle of wine. At some point, it's about scarcity. And I completely agree with Tim that things that are crazy expensive because they're scarce. It's like, Louis the 13th is a famous cognac that you can pay $450 for a glass of it. That's just dumb, and it's expensive because all of the oligarchs and the Chinese billionaires bought it up. That's why you can't. Just like a Picasso, there's not many of them. But in terms of for Tim, think of the most expensive thing in your store, most expensive piece of meat in your store that you regularly sell, that you can stand behind, that you believe is of value.
Sure,
because somebody can get sirloin tips for, what do you charge for sirloin tips? $14.99 a pound?
Let's bounce them there.
Right. So what is the most expensive thing in your store that you stand behind and say, this is worth it?
It's worth
I would
it.
say,
That's a great question.
I would say, in my opinion, I would say F1 Japanese Wagyu. I would say that's about $100, 100 to 110 a pound. And
I was
a pound.
I was just going to ask you if Wagyu and Kobe
It's a
beef
pound.
was worth it. I think you answered my question.
It is worth it, but that's something it's a special occasion thing. It's a dinner party thing, and it's not something that you're going to take and you're going to have everybody's going to have a steak, because that's not what it's for.
Mhm.
And certainly not a 16-ounce steak. You know,
absolutely not. Most people's body can't even handle that much of that type of steak because of the richness level of it.
I mean, having worked at a few really high-end steakhouses, and knowing, you know, working in fine dining, you know, we're very much aware of what this costs to even get to the plate. And we're very much aware that only certain people will have access to our menus, and dining with us. And those people are generally going to be, you know, pretty wealthy. And when you're talking about those $1,000 steaks or $125 steak, or going to Ruth's Chris and getting $150 steak. I did last year at the Sagamore, I did a $150 porterhouse with 2 sides for 2 people. You know, that's the demographic. The demographic that we're shooting for in that case is, you know, your 5 to 1%ers in earnings, right? And the feedback is, you know, that people that earn that kind of money, they want the service, they want the experience. It's not just about eating the meat. They want the exclusivity of that experience. And that's also where they place the value, not just in the digestion or the eating of a golden encrusted steak. It's just being able to say they did it and to get that high-end service as well. You know, and we have to charge these prices to bring that service to them and still make a profit, albeit very minimal in restaurants and in food retail too.
Yeah.
So where do you, go ahead, I interrupted. Go ahead, Tim.
A lot of it, even when people do make the decision to make that purchase, a lot of the hype and the talk up even before the sale is, you know, it's Wagyu, 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 Wagyu. So there's a catchphrase there. There's a word that people know but don't necessarily know what it is, but it's because it's talked about in such a high esteem that people, it's a big deal. And especially if you're the one hosting a party or going out to dinner or however you're doing this, it's the esteem of the cut that makes it a little bit more of value than the actual. I mean, it's delicious, don't get me wrong, but it's part of that is the esteem of having the cut there and serving it to your dinner party or going out to dinner and ordering and say, I went to this restaurant and I had, you know, Japanese Wagyu and it was $300 a pound and it was delicious. And you know, it's
the experience as well
story.
as, Sorry, I'm talking over you, but it's the experience, not just the food itself.
Sure.
But I want to get back to the food itself for a minute. I want to know where each of you stand on the debate about whether meat is evolutionarily important. Is there such a word, evolutionarily important to humans? This is how we got our big brains, because of the calorie-rich, protein-rich meat we ate.
Definitely. Well, if you remember in school when you're talking about like Neanderthals and way back in caveman times, hunter gatherer, right? It's hunter first. It's always been hunter first and gatherer. Not because necessarily one's easier than the other, because it clearly isn't. But the hunter-gatherer question, I think, sort of shows you that it is important. And I think it's always going to be important. And I believe that it's never going to ever be, you know, replaced.
Emily, you have anything to add to that? You've studied... Go ahead.
Absolutely. Animal proteins are going to remain essential to human nutrition. I don't understand what data would point to any conclusion otherwise. And am I to listen to the 1 million vegans in the country to tell me that we've evolved?
Not if you can help it.
Past that diet. Oh, and can we just, by the way, mention that out of the 1 million vegans, about 80% of them are going to turn within a year? And of the 900 or the 9.7 million vegetarians out there, about half of them say they still eat chicken or fish. I don't know if they know what vegetarian means. So I'm not inclined to listen to whatever pseudoscience rewriting of anthropology and food studies that they want to do. There's just, if you look at the data, the nutritional value of meat, and what it does for our bodies, I have yet to find a compelling argument to cite any proof even that we're moving beyond meat as an essential nutritional value in our human existence.
Evidence aside, PETA does publicize that widely, that we are all by nature, by evolution, herbivores. Steve, you buy that? Feel like you could live on carrots and celery?
First, I don't think we're going to devolve and get smaller brains if we all turn into vegetarians, but evolution takes forever. We don't have the teeth to exist. You ever seen a cow's tooth? I mean, cows, it's a very, Emily, how many stomachs does the cow have? 6?
4.
4, okay. And why do they need so many stomachs? Because they eat a huge amount of food that takes a whole lot to break down, right?
Yep.
I had a vegetarian once say that meat doesn't actually get digested; it just sits in your colon for weeks until it rots. And I was like, I didn't know there was a fast lane for corn, but meat, just we didn't digest it; it just rotted, and it's just not true. So, and going back particularly to Emily's point, if you can get complete proteins out of 4 ounces of, again, quality beef, pork, fish, chicken, why would you want to eat 6 cups of peas plus a bunch of other things that do it? Yeah. Because and again, we've been beating up on vegetarians pretty good, but I don't mean to seem smug about it, but we are, as I said in the beginning, we are still winning, and I think it's not just because all of these stupid, complacent people don't realize they're killing themselves every time they eat an animal protein. I think it is because, in general, when done right, it's better for human beings to eat complete diets that include lots and lots of vegetables and also quality protein.
I have never been so hungry. I need a hamburger so bad after this discussion. We've been talking with Steve Barnes, food critic and columnist for the Times-Union, Tiim Howland from Primal Meats, and Emily Petersen, who is a teacher and a butcheress, a horrible word I just learned really still exists. A butcheress.
Wife. I'll take a fish wife any day.
Indeed. Thank you all very much. This was great, and we did beat up on the vegetarians. I bet we don't hear a word from them though about it now. I love everything about meat. I love the smell of bacon in the morning. I love the dress that Lady Gaga wore out of meat. I love everything about it. Meat is love to me. And I know that sounds pretty schmaltzy, but in the same way that I, as a kid, used to confuse Perry Como with my dad because they both had that same little curl of dark hair on the forehead, meat is wrapped up in all my memories of my father. He was a butcher. He was that his whole adult life. And while he never made a lot of money, my sisters and I ate like princesses. I went on a camping trip once when I was in junior high school, and my friend's mother told us she had a big surprise for dinner. I later told my mother incredulously that the surprise was there was a steak, one steak for the entire family. We were definitely spoiled. My dad's store in Troy, the Franklin Market, was an exotic, wonderful place for us to visit. We didn't get to do it very often. It was filled with big, loud men in white aprons. There was sawdust on the floor. It was every kid who came in with their parents got a hot dog or a slice of bologna. I don't even eat those things anymore, but I still, whenever I get a whiff of the of meat. That's what it reminds me of, Dad, in his store. He regaled us with stories about his customers. They confided in him more willingly than I think to their parish priest. And sure, a diet of lots of red meat, we know now, probably contributed to his death of congestive heart failure. But his children have learned to moderate. Biting into a piece of pork or fillet still feels like an homage to my father. And Zachary Grady, our producer, you also had some experiences with Guy and meat, didn't you, Zach?
Well, I would say it would be more Guy and meat and football. And that's, especially as we're getting ready for this weekend's big game here on Sunday. Him coming home with hamburgers and hot dogs and cooking on the grill, even, late into the fall and sometimes into the winter time. And then my grandmother even, cooking hamburgers and hot dogs on the cast iron skillets in the kitchen, and that smell that always was the Franklin market. And, that also, my father, being a chef, it plays with him as well. So meat and football and family are all things that have been very close to my heart for many, many years.
So a toast to our fathers and to meat. Please subscribe to an Armao on the Brink. This doesn't cost anything and it really helps us out a lot. You can just go to the podcast platform of your choice and follow their instructions to subscribe or follow or like and rate us. The more you do that, the more sponsors that we can end up getting. And that gives us a chance to do more and more extensive programming, which I would really like. I think you would like it too. I also have to tell you about something new we have coming on later this month, an On the Brink website. This is a place where you will be able to interact with me and our guest panelists, get background information on the issues and the topics that we bring up. You can make suggestions, render complaints even. You can hear my rants. And I have a lot of opinions, A weekly podcast just can't contain them all. So watch out for our upcoming website. Thank you.